2 years after the siege, Oakhaven did not look like a fairy tale. That was how Clara Hayes knew the repair had a chance of being real. The community center still had old bricks, winter drafts, and a heating system that complained in the walls. But it also had a court-confirmed deed restriction, a public trust, audited maintenance funds, corrected health service records, and an annual report anyone could read. Elias Thorne no longer controlled the corporation that once tried to erase the center. His dementia had progressed, and some mornings he could not remember why the town knew his name. But the documents remembered, the trust remembered, Clara remembered, Leo remembered, and slowly Elias learned that the best legacy is not the building with your name on it, but the protection that works after you can no longer explain why it matters. The Oakhaven Heritage Trust's second annual public report was printed on plain paper, not glossy stock. Clara insisted on that. She had seen too many institutions hide thin accountability behind expensive design. The trust report used readable type, numbered pages, simple charts, and an appendix that listed every restricted donation, every maintenance expense, every conflict disclosure, every health service interruption, and every corrective action still unfinished. It was not beautiful in the way corporate reports are beautiful. It was useful. That made it more beautiful to her than any rendering Thorne Corporation had ever paid for. On the cover was a black and white photograph of the community center, taken in 1965. The year after the Mill families finished building it, men stood in shirt sleeves beside women in work dresses and children holding paper cups, all gathered on the front steps before the ramp existed, before the basement became a respiratory support room, before anyone could imagine data centers or vendor engagement contracts, or a billionaire with a trembling hand trying to undo what his name had nearly done. Beneath the photo were 3 lines: Oakhaven Heritage Trust, Year 2 Public Report, Civic Use, Public Welfare, and Repair Without Naming Rights. Clara ran one finger over the cover as the copier warmed behind her. Room 204 looked different now, not transformed, improved. The filing cabinets had been replaced with donated metal shelving. The evidence wall had become a permanent accountability board. A laminated timeline hung near the door, beginning with the original deed restriction, moving through the missing Appendix F, the public record hearing, the court order, the state audit, the trust charter, and the first completed ventilation upgrade. Each item named the document that proved it. Leo had designed the timeline before leaving for college orientation. He said people should be able to walk into the room and understand within 1 minute what happened and what fixed it. Clara had smiled when he said that. He did not know he was speaking like the answer engine of a town. Direct, structured, evidence first. Outside room 204, the center was alive on a cold March afternoon. Children worked through homework at the front tables. The basement health support room had reopened after upgrades funded through the state settlement and trust reserve. New ventilation, sealed walls, a dehumidification system with maintenance logs posted publicly, and a backup location agreement with the library in case of any future closure. No one had pretended the old basement was perfect. They had made it safer and documented the plan. That was repair, not denial. The audit of Thorne Corporation had taken 14 months. It had confirmed that Appendix F was removed from the public packet after internal discussion of permitting delay risk. It found that the title vendor's likely waivable language had been accepted without proper legal review. It found that North Star Civic Strategy's bonus clause created improper incentives for private pressure during public review. It found that local tax projections had been circulated in ways that contributed to premature reassessments. It did not find a cartoon conspiracy. That made the report stronger, not weaker. The harm had been caused by incentives, schedules, filtered summaries, careless power, and people who knew enough to stop but not enough to care. The settlement that followed did not make anyone rich. Clara made sure of that. Funds went to the trust maintenance reserve, the basement health upgrade, legal aid clinics for residents affected by development pressure, tax reassessment review assistance, public record training for town volunteers, and a county-wide rule requiring service displacement disclosures in major incentive applications. Parents received reimbursement for documented costs during the temporary basement closure, administered through a third-party claims process, not through private envelopes. Thomas's diner fines were dismissed after inspection targeting was reviewed. Mrs. Gable's reassessment was corrected. North Star lost its county eligibility for 5 years. Vance left Thorne Corporation and later testified under subpoena in a related governance proceeding. He never apologized publicly. Clara did not need him to perform remorse. She needed the incentive clause removed from future contracts. Elias paid the largest personal price, though even that phrase had to be handled carefully. He did not become poor in the way ordinary people become poor. He still had more resources than most Americans could imagine. But he lost the thing he had valued most, control of the narrative. The board removed him as CEO, then negotiated his resignation as chair. After the state audit cited leadership accountability, shareholders sued. Financial outlets called his final year erratic. Former allies described him as compromised. The Civic Grid project was redesigned on a smaller industrial site outside the historic square, with a legally required service impact review and no Thorne naming rights. The company survived. That, too, was realistic. Large systems often survive the people they sacrifice. But it survived change. Constrained by audit orders, compliance monitors, and disclosures, no one inside the old process would have volunteered. Elias moved permanently to Oakhaven 6 months after the hearing, not to own it, not to be adored by it. He moved because his Manhattan penthouse had become a museum of a self he could no longer inhabit. The rooms were too large, the elevator too silent, the staff too careful, the skyline too indifferent. In Oakhaven, people did not let him disappear into luxury. Mrs. Gable corrected him when he missed a meeting. Thomas at the diner gave him soup and made him pay exactly $4 because free food makes rich men sentimental. The county nurse checked whether he had taken his medication without lowering her voice as if illness were shameful. Clara made him write things down. Leo, before college, made him sandwood. The cottage came later. The trust did not buy it for him. Clara would not allow trust money to become private gratitude. A group of residents formed a separate, transparent housing cooperative fund after Elias sold a small personal property and donated the proceeds into a restricted account that he did not control. The cooperative bought a modest one-story cottage near the square and leased it to him at fair market senior housing rates, with caregiving support arranged through his own medical funds. The paperwork was boring. That was why it was ethical. Clara remembered the meeting where someone suggested simply gifting him the house. We are not turning community care into reverse patronage. He does not get a monument, and we do not get to feel noble by ignoring governance. Mrs. Gable had nodded. Fair market lease. Clear records. No nonsense. So that was what they did. The cottage had a porch, a small garden, 2 bedrooms, and a work shed in the back, where Elias kept cedar scraps, clamps, and tools Leo labeled in large print. A calendar hung beside the kitchen door. Clara wrote appointments in black marker. Lydia, who left Thorne Corporation after the audit and became an independent compliance consultant, visited once a month to help Elias review legal and medical paperwork. Dr. Reed coordinated with a local physician. A neighbor checked in each morning. None of it cured him. It kept him connected. On most mornings, Elias walked to the center with an ashwood cane. His pace had changed. Once he moved like a man crossing rooms he already owned. Now he moved with the careful attention of someone negotiating weather, curb cuts, memory, and the kindness of people who did not rush him. He greeted the bakery window first because the smell of bread anchored him. Then he paused at the plaque near the community center. It read, "This building is protected for education, public welfare, and non-commercial civic use under the Oakhaven Heritage Trust and County Court. Order 24 CV 1187. Public reports available inside." The first time Elias read it, he had cried, quietly. Not because the plaque excluded him, but because it did not need him. On the afternoon the Year 2 report was to be presented, Clara found him in the workshop shed behind his cottage. He was seated at a bench, a wool blanket over his knees, his white hair thin in the window light. In front of him lay a small cedar box, nearly finished. The dovetailed joints were imperfect but honest. The lid had been sanded smooth. On the inside, in letters Leo had penciled for him to carve, were 3 words: "Fix what matters." Elias held a carving tool loosely in his right hand. The hand trembled too much to cut. "Elias," Clara said from the doorway. He looked up with polite uncertainty. There were days he knew her immediately. There were days he knew her after a few seconds. There were days he knew only that she mattered and waited for the details to return. Today was a waiting day. She stepped inside, not too quickly. "It's Clara." His face softened. "Clara Hayes." "Yes." "The teacher." "Yes, the one who reads the page." She smiled. "That is one way to put it." He looked down at the box. "I was making this for someone. For Leo." "Leo," he repeated, and the name brought light into his eyes. "Architecture, urban planning and architecture. He says buildings should be judged by who can still use them when the ribbon cutting is over." Elias smiled. "That sounds like his mother. It sounds like him too." He touched the unfinished letters. "I cannot finish the carving. Then we ask him to finish it with you when he comes home Friday. I wanted to give him something made by my hands. It is not complete. Most true things are completed by more than one person." He considered that. The idea seemed to comfort him because it did not deny the loss. Clara had learned not to offer false reassurance. She never said, "You will remember." She said, "The record remembers." She never said, "You are fine." She said, "Here is the next step." Dignity, she had discovered, was not pretending decline had no teeth. Dignity was building enough structure that a person did not have to be humiliated by needing help. Elias placed the tool down. "Is today the report?" "Yes, 4 o'clock. Am I speaking?" "You wrote a statement last week. You asked me to read it with you before we decide." She took a folded page from her bag. The handwriting was partly his, partly dictated to Lydia, with Clara's notes in the margin. He read the first line slowly. "I used to believe legacy was a structure people could see." He stopped, frowning. "Did I write this?" "Yes." "Is it true?" "Yes." He read further. "Now I believe legacy is also a rule, a record, a trust, a corrected file, a public report, a maintenance schedule, and a person who refuses to sign silence when silence would be easier." His eyes filled. He turned away slightly, embarrassed by the tears. Clara looked at the workbench and gave him privacy without leaving him alone. "I do not deserve this town," he said. "No one deserves a town," Clara replied. "You participate in one." He let out a small breath that might have been a laugh. At 4 o'clock, the community center main room filled for the annual report meeting. It was not dramatic, but it mattered enough that people came. Parents sat with children. Seniors took the front row because Mrs. Gable believed age earned back support. Thomas brought coffee. Dr. Mills brought the basement maintenance log. Miriam Patel brought the trust compliance binder. Lydia stood near the side wall, no longer representing Thorne Corporation, still watching documents as if they were living things. Leo arrived 5 minutes late from the bus station, backpack over one shoulder, hair longer than Clara remembered, face thinner in the way. College makes young people look both older and underfed. Clara hugged him hard enough to make him complain. "Mom, people can see." "Good." He saw Elias across the room and lifted a hand. Elias lifted his back, then looked to Clara as if asking for the name. "Leo," she whispered. "Leo," he said, and smiled. The meeting began with a report, not a speech. Clara stood at the front beside a projector. On the screen appeared the first chart: trust revenue and restricted uses. She explained every line: maintenance reserve, basement ventilation, legal clinic, public record workshops, senior access repairs, youth workshop tools, audit response costs, no naming rights revenue, no private donor restrictions inconsistent with civic use. Then Dr. Mills presented health data, carefully anonymized. Asthma-related early pickups had declined after ventilation upgrades. Program attendance had increased because parents trusted the written backup plan. The basement closure protocol had been tested during a boiler repair and worked. Children moved to the library annex for 2 days, with transportation provided through the county agreement. Then Miriam reviewed legal status: court order active, trust charter compliant, conflict disclosures filed, public reports archived. Development Impact Disclosure Rule adopted county-wide. The civic grid redesign no longer touched the historic square. Then Leo spoke. Clara had not expected it. He had only been listed as youth representative, but he walked to the front carrying the cedar box. "I want to say something about repair," he began. His voice was lower now, but still careful. "When I was 16, I thought repair meant making broken things work again because we could not afford to replace them. Bikes, laptops, chairs, toasters. I still think that. But this town taught me repair also means fixing the rule that keeps breaking people's lives." The center did not survive because one rich man changed his heart. It survived because my mother kept documents. Mrs. Gable made people sign in. Parents saved call logs. Nurses wrote letters. Lawyers filed the right papers. And Mr. Thorne finally stopped letting his company summarize away the truth. He looked at Elias, not accusing, not flattering. "This box is for my drafting tools." Mr. Thorne started it. "I finished the inside lettering this morning. It says, 'Fix what matters.' I am taking it to school because I want to design buildings and systems where repair is not an afterthought." The room was silent in the best way. Then Mrs. Gable began clapping, and everyone followed. Elias did not clap at first. He looked at the box, then at Leo, and something in his face opened with recognition deep enough to hurt. When he raised his hands, the right one trembled. Leo stepped down from the front and sat beside him, placing the box gently in his lap for a moment. "You made this," Leo said. "We made this," Elias answered. "Yes, that was the better sentence." Clara read Elias' statement near the end. He stood beside her, one hand on the podium, while she read because he had asked for support rather than risking confusion in front of the room. That request, too, was part of repair. Pride had caused harm. Dependence, named honestly, did not. "I used to believe legacy was a structure people could see," Clara read. "Now I believe legacy is also a rule, a record, a trust, a corrected file, a public report, a maintenance schedule, and a person who refuses to sign silence when silence would be easier. Oakhaven did not teach me kindness by admiring me. It taught me accountability by requiring me to become useful to a repair I could not own." She paused. Elias continued the last line himself. "If my memory fails, let the record remember that the center belongs to the people who use it." No one needed more. After the meeting, people lingered. Annual reports rarely inspire lingering, but this one carried pieces of many lives. Parents asked Dr. Mills about the backup location. Seniors signed up for the tax clinic. A young mother asked Clara how to request records from her landlord. Thomas told Leo he looked too skinny and wrapped 2 sandwiches in foil. Mrs. Gable made Elias sign the attendance sheet even though everyone had seen him there. "Rules are rules," she said. He signed slowly. "Purpose, annual report." He wrote it down. Then he added, after a pause, "Witness." Mrs. Gable read the word and said nothing. Her silence was kinder than praise. Clara found Elias on the porch later, after the room had emptied, and the report copies were stacked near the door. The evening had softened. Spring was still weeks away, but the air had begun to loosen its grip. Across the square, the bakery lights glowed. A child rode a repaired bicycle in a careful circle, wobbling but upright. "Are you tired?" Clara asked. "Yes." "Do you want me to walk you home?" "I know the way." She waited. He looked at her, then smiled faintly. "But I would like company." They walked slowly. The square had changed in small, durable ways. The old bank building had become a shared workspace with 2 local businesses and a vocational classroom. The vacant feed supply building housed a county satellite office twice a week, so people did not have to drive 40 miles for forms. The diner still needed a new freezer. The pharmacy was still closed. Oakhaven still had problems no trust could solve. But the town was no longer being asked to choose between decline and erasure. It had learned to ask for the documents behind the choice. At the cottage gate, Elias stopped. "Clara," he said. "Yes. Did you forgive me?" The question arrived without warning. She looked at the hydrangea stems, still bare from winter. She could have given him a soft answer. It would have comforted him. It would also have made the story too easy. "I do not know," she said. He nodded, accepting the honesty. She continued, "Some days I am grateful for what you did after you read the truth. Some days I am angry that you had to be forced to read it. Some days I see you with Leo, and I am glad you are here. Some days I remember that 42 children were called a disclosure risk in a file with your name on it. Forgiveness is not a switch I owe you, because you helped repair what should never have been broken." Elias held the gate with one hand. "That is fair. It is also not the only measure. You do not need my full forgiveness to keep doing the next right thing." He looked relieved, though not absolved. That seemed right. "Thank you," he said, "for not forgiving you, for not making it simple." She smiled sadly. "I am a history teacher. Simple is usually where the lie begins." Inside the cottage, the calendar by the door listed tomorrow's tasks. Medication, breakfast, walk, workshop with Leo, review advanced care plan with Lydia. Clara had helped write the last item, and Elias had agreed because they both understood that repair also applied to illness. He would not leave crisis decisions to panic if documents could carry his choices more kindly. Before she left, he took the year 2 report from his bag and placed it on the kitchen table. "Where should this go?" he asked. "Important papers basket." He placed it there carefully. Then he looked at the basket, at the calendar, at the labels on the cabinets, at the life that had become smaller but more connected than the empire he lost. "I spent so long trying to be remembered by strangers," he said. "I did not understand the mercy of being reminded by friends." Clara's throat tightened. "That is a good line," she said. "Did I steal it from someone?" "Not this time." The following summer, the center held a Saturday repair fair. It was not part of a grand finale. It was simply what the center did now. Repair bicycles, update laptops, explain property tax notices, help people request medical bills in writing, show tenants how to keep receipts, teach teenagers how to read public agendas, and feed whoever stayed long enough to be hungry. A banner over the workshop read, "Fix what matters. Repair fair and recourse clinic." Leo ran a table on accessible design. Clara led a session called How to Read the Page Under the Page. Mrs. Gable managed sign-in with uncompromising authority. Dr. Mills checked air quality monitors in the basement. Lydia taught volunteers how to preserve emails and voicemails without altering metadata. Elias sat at a shaded table, sanding cedar blocks with children who were allowed to ask him questions, only if they wore safety glasses. A little girl held up a crooked piece of wood. "Is this ruined?" Elias looked at it carefully. "No, the line is crooked, but the wood is sound. We adjust the design." Leo, passing behind him, grinned. "Careful, that's a whole philosophy." Elias looked confused for a second, then amused. "Good. Someone should write it down." Clara, from the records table, lifted a marker. Already did. The years would continue to take things from Elias. Everyone knew that. The disease did not become gentle because a town learned to care. There would be harder mornings, repeated questions, misplaced names, grief that arrived in small rooms instead of dramatic scenes. But the story did not require pretending loss had been defeated. It required showing what responsible people build around loss, so dignity does not have to stand alone. That autumn, when Leo left for school with the cedar box wrapped in a towel between textbooks, he placed one copy of the trust report inside it. The box held drafting pencils, a compass, a small ruler, and the document that had changed his understanding of design. Buildings mattered. Systems mattered more. A ramp mattered. A ventilation log mattered. A deed restriction mattered. A public meeting agenda mattered. The shape of a city could either hide dependency or honor it. On the inside lid, the carved words had darkened with oil. Fix what matters. 1 month after the year's first test, without Elias's authority behind it, a regional broadband company applied to place a service cabinet on the edge of the center parking lot. The proposal was not evil. In fact, better broadband would help students, seniors, telehealth appointments, and the records clinic. But the first site sketch placed the cabinet beside the side entrance, narrowing the accessible path during snow season and blocking the delivery route for the food pantry. 3 years earlier, the town might have accepted the sketch because the company used words like improvement, modernization, and community benefit. This time, Mrs. Gable circled the blocked path in red marker. Leo reviewed the measurements over video call and asked for turning radius diagrams. Dr. Mills asked whether emergency medical access would be affected. Miriam asked for an easement map and maintenance schedule. Clara asked one question at the public meeting. Who will be inconvenienced first if this plan is wrong? The broadband representative, a young man with a neat tie and a nervous smile, looked down at the sketch as if seeing it for the first time. To his credit, he did not defend the indefensible. He requested 2 weeks to revise the plan. The cabinet was moved to the rear utility strip. The company agreed to snow clearance terms in writing, and the trust approved the project. That small scene mattered because it proved the repair had left the original conflict. It was no longer only about Thorne Corporation. The town had learned a method. Make the invisible user visible before approval. Ask who pays for convenience. Put the answer in writing. Elias attended that meeting, but he did not speak. He sat with the report in his lap and followed the conversation as best he could. At one point, he whispered to Clara, "Is this ours?" She whispered back, "No, that is the point." He looked puzzled, then pleased. After the meeting, the broadband representative approached Clara near the coffee table. "I hope I did not seem careless," he said. "You seemed like someone using a template." Clara replied. He winced. "That may be worse. It is only worse if you refuse to revise it." He nodded toward the room. "People here are very specific. They had to become specific." That sentence traveled with him. 6 months later, the company updated its rural installation checklist to include accessible path diagrams and service interruption disclosures for community facilities. It was not a headline. It was not emotionally grand. But somewhere else, in another small town, a wheelchair ramp would not be narrowed because Oakhaven had made specificity contagious. Clara added the checklist update to the trust's next public report. Not because the trust wanted credit, because repairs should teach. In late September, Elias had a hard week. He misplaced his house keys twice, called Leo by his father's name once, and became frightened in the grocery store when the aisles seemed to shift around him. Thomas, who happened to be buying onions, did not make a scene. He stood beside Elias, pointed to the overhead signs, and said, "Bread is this way, soup is that way, and if you came for coffee, you already passed it because you were judging the produce." Elias laughed, and the fear loosened. Later, Clara found him sitting on the bench outside the bakery, embarrassed. "I am becoming trouble," he said. "You are becoming someone who needs a clearer plan." That is a generous translation. It is an accurate one. Together with Lydia, Dr. Reed, and the local physician, they revised his support schedule. More check-ins. A card in his wallet with his address and emergency contacts. A written walking route with landmarks. A community agreement that no one would treat, helping him find his way as gossip. Elias resisted the wallet card at first. Then Clara placed the old Appendix F folder on the table between them. "You taught your company to hide vulnerability," she said. "Do not make us repeat that mistake with yours." He stared at the folder. Then he took the card. The next morning, he showed it to Mrs. Gable with solemn dignity. "If I become misplaced," he said, "apparently I am to be returned to the cottage, not the lost and found box." Mrs. Gable inspected the card. "Good. I do not have shelf space for billionaires." The joke helped because it made help ordinary. That was another invisible legacy. A town learning to support decline without turning a person into a spectacle. Elias was not forgiven into sainthood. He was not punished into isolation. He was included inside rules clear enough to protect everyone's dignity. Clara wrote that lesson down too, though not for publication. It went into her private teaching notebook under a heading she used for future stories and future students. Care is a system before it is a feeling. She underlined it twice. Years later, people would ask what saved the Oakhaven Community Center. Some would say Clara Hayes. Some would say the hidden appendix. Some would say Elias Thorne's testimony. Some would say Leo's evidence index, Mrs. Gable's sign-in logs, Dr. Mills's health order, Miriam Patel's petition. Lydia chose preserved records, or the parents who refused private pressure. The honest answer was all of them, arranged in the right order, refusing to let one person become the whole story. That was the invisible legacy. Not a tower, not a name in steel. Not a billionaire made saint by one dramatic apology. A public record that could be read after memory failed. A trust that could say no after donors left. A maintenance schedule that kept children breathing. A county rule that made future developers disclose the people their maps preferred not to show. A young man designing buildings with evidence in his toolbox. A teacher who understood that love of history is not love of the past, but loyalty to the people who will need the truth later. And an old man walking slowly across the square, sometimes unsure of the day, sometimes unsure of the names, but never again treated as useless, because the town had learned the difference between pity and care. On the last page of the Year 2 report, beneath the audit summary and above the contact information, Clara had placed one sentence approved by the trust board. Repair is not complete when the powerful feel better. Repair begins when the vulnerable are safer without needing the powerful to remember. Elias read that sentence many times. Some days he understood every word. Some days Clara read it to him. Some days Leo read it over the phone from school. Some days Mrs. Gable pointed to the report and said, "There, that's why you're here." And the sentence held. That is what good records do. They hold the truth on the days human beings cannot hold it alone. In the end, Oakhaven remained ordinary, still imperfect, still carrying winter bills and aging buildings, and young people leaving for chances elsewhere. But now the town has a stronger spine, a trust, an audit, a court order, a public report, and a habit of reading the hidden page. Elias Thorne loses pieces of memory, but he no longer has to purchase remembrance through monuments. Clara Hayes does not grant cheap forgiveness, but she helps build durable repair. Leo carries the lesson forward in wood, paper, and design, and the community center remains what it always was, only now protected by words strong enough to outlast the people who wrote them. Fix what matters.